Hi everybody, Dustin from Noble House Dog Training here. Today we're making you a video about Phase 1 obedience. Phase 1 obedience is the most important phase of obedience training, and that's the phase where we're going to be working exclusively in positive reinforcement. A dog's never going to graduate from Phase 1 obedience. The behaviors always need to be reinforced if you expect them to continue to happen. If you stop reinforcing, sooner or later behavior is going to become extinct. Talking about long-term maintenance of behaviors in dog training, phase 1 obedience is 80% of your long-term maintenance. About the other 20% is going to be done in phases 2 and 3, but positive reinforcement of the dog is where almost all of your long-term maintenance is at, and it's really important in teaching the dog what we want to do. So the textbook definition of phase 1 obedience is the process through which we teach a dog a behavior and then variously reward them until they can perform the behavior on demand in exchange for positive reinforcement. So in order to do that, we're going to break phase 1 down into 6 steps. It's marking a behavior, and then we're going to be fading any lures or prompts. And then we're going to use an interval reward schedule, a duration reward schedule, a ratio reward schedule, and then we're going to switch our rewards over to a Premack principle reward schedule. I should say Premack principle reward on a variable reward schedule. So using just those 6 steps, like I mentioned before, you can teach any simple behavior to a dog. If you add shaping and chaining and do a little bit of tweaking of your reinforcement schedules, you can use these same steps to teach any complex behavior to a dog. In the rest of the video, we're going to break down those 6 steps again, marking a behavior, fading a lure or prompt, interval rewards, duration rewards, ratio rewards, and Premack principle. We'll break those 6 steps down one by one, and we'll demonstrate on a dog how that actually looks. All right, moving into the first 2 steps of phase 1 obedience, marking a behavior and then fading our prompt. They go together pretty well, so I'm going to teach them in this same section right here. So marking a behavior, the textbook definition for marking a behavior is using a conditioned reinforcer to communicate to the dog when it's performing the behavior we desire. Textbook definitions are usually pretty long and kind of confusing, so I'm going to break them down and try and make them a little more simple here. Before we can talk exactly what marking is, we got to pull that word conditioned reinforcer. Using a conditioned reinforcer to communicate to the dog when it's performing the behavior we desire. What's a conditioned reinforcer? So we'll go right back to the textbook, and the textbook definition for a conditioned reinforcer is a stimulus that initially has no reinforcing properties, but through occurring simultaneously with unconditioned reinforcers, acquires reinforcing properties. And basically the simple definition for conditioned reinforcer that's going to work for what we're doing today is that a conditioned reinforcer is a meaningless signal that we teach to the dog so that they understand when they're doing the right thing. You may have seen people walking around clicking dogs with little clickers. A clicker is a conditioned reinforcer. And also a lot of people use verbal conditioned reinforcers. For somebody just trying to teach your dog general obedience so that they can get along in the house and learn how to be a good dog, verbal conditioned reinforcer is all you need. A lot of people like to use the word yes or the word good. It doesn't matter as long as you can do it consistently. That's all you need. Now, if you're going to go and start teaching a little more complex behaviors to dogs or doing some shaping and chaining, a clicker can really help as a conditioned reinforcer. A clicker has some advantages. It is a clear, it is a consistent and immediate reinforcer, which is really good for the dog and helping them learn if you're trying to move into shaping behaviors and getting them to do fancier tricks. For what we're going to be using today, we're not going to use a clicker. We're just going to use a verbal conditioner, as that's what's going to work for most people, and it's easiest and pretty well for everybody to use. So in order to use our conditioned reinforcer to mark that behavior, because that's what we're going to do, is take that conditioned reinforcer, our click or our yes, and we're going to tell that to the dog when they're doing the right thing in order they understand they're doing the right thing, and then we'll give them a reward, and we can continue from there. In order to initially get that behavior out of the dog, so that we can mark it and reward it, we're usually going to have to prompt the dog one way or another. Now, the textbook definition for a prompt is an antecedent stimulus that brings about a certain behavior in the dog. And the simple definition of that is That is anything we do to the dog to get it to do the behavior we want. So oftentimes, if you're trying to get a dog to sit, if you take a little bit of food in your hand and you hold it above the dog's nose and kind of move it back, the dog's butt is going to naturally come down to the ground. That's a prompt. And anytime you're using food as a prompt like that, that's called luring. So luring is typically the easiest and best way to get dogs to do simple behaviors like down, simply lower the treat down to the ground. And have the dog follow it, sit, same thing, come, you can do the same thing. So a lure is typically for simple behaviors is the easiest and most common type of prompt you're gonna see. If you're trying to teach more complex behaviors to a dog, you're gonna have to be really creative in your prompts. Depending on what behavior you're trying to teach and what you need the dog to do, there's gonna be different prompts you'll have to come up with. So the last thing I wanna talk about before I actually start demonstrating on the dog here is timing. Timing is super important in your delivery of your conditioned reinforcer. You can be a little bit sloppy in the timing of your treats, giving out the treats, as long as your conditioned reinforcer is really, really accurate. You want to deliver that conditioned reinforcer, so in our case it's going to be a yes. You want to deliver that yes at the very instant the dog performs the behavior you want. That's going to be clear to the dog what you're asking it to perform and what it's being rewarded for. And when you can be consistent and accurate with your timing, it's going to help the dog learn a lot more accurately and a lot faster. So with having said that, let's go ahead and get ready to demonstrate on a dog here. Senna, come! Out. Okay, so I'm going to be demonstrating on Senna today, and we're going to go through the steps of marking and fading here. So I'm going to go, Senna does a heel on the right side of me, and I want to get him to start doing a heel on the left side. So we're going to start marking that behavior today. Now, I have worked on this a little bit with him, but he's by no means any pro. So this is going to be good for him, and it's going to be a really good way to demonstrate what we're talking about. I'm going to demonstrate marking of behavior. I have Senna in a heel on my right side where he normally heels at. I am going to say his name, and then I'm going to give him the command port, and then I'm going to use a lure by going behind my back, putting some treats in his nose, and then I'm going to lure him into the position. Yes, I'm going to mark that behavior with the conditioned reinforcer and then reward him. Senna, heel. Senna, port. Yes, good boy. Heel. Good boy. Senna, port. Yes, good boy. You want to continue to mark the behavior with the dog until the dog is visibly confident in what you're asking it to perform. When the dog is very confidently going into the position of the behavior you're trying to get to, then you can start to fade off of our prompt, off of our lure. So what we would do in this case, I was reaching behind me and bringing Senna around my back with this lure. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to do the same thing, but with no treat in my hand. Rather than having a treat in my hand, I'm going to have him follow my empty hand. And after he's doing that very confidently, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make that hand gesture smaller. So instead of reaching my hand all the way across my back, I'm probably just going to stick my hand across my back. And when he goes to follow that forward, I'll bring it forward. I'll mark and reward him. And I'm going to keep doing that with smaller and smaller iterations of the hand movement until eventually probably it'll just get down to a little twitch of my hand and he'll jump over to this side. And then after that, I can make that twitch even smaller to the point where he no longer needs the verbal command, or he no longer needs the hand signal gesture at all, and he'll just go on verbal command. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate that a little bit right here. Senna, come. Come here, buddy. Out. Out. Senna, heel. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just no treat in my hand this time. I'm going to bring an empty hand around. Senna, port. Yes, good boy. And now I'll treat him. So we would do that again, Senna. So after some repetitions of that, we could do something that looked like this. Senna, port, heel. Good boy. So I'll make that hand gesture smaller. I'm only going to go halfway around my back. Senna, port. Yes, good boy. Good job, buddy. So normally this is not done right after another. Normally this is going to take you a day to a couple days to maybe a week or two. Anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks is pretty normal for dogs. Obviously I've worked on this a little bit with Senna so that he looks good in the demonstration. Senna, heel. So now, maybe after I'm bringing my hand halfway across my back, maybe I'm just going to bring my hand to my side. Senna, port. Yes, good boy. Good job, buddy. Good job. Senna, heel. And so after I do that for a couple sessions and he's getting that down pretty good where I'm just bringing my hand to my side, I'm going to make the gesture smaller again, and I'm going to do just a little wiggle of my arm this time. Senna, port. Good boy. Yes, good boy. Good boy. Senna, heel. Good boy. And so after you've done that and the dog gets used to just that little jerk of your arm, then you can get rid of that completely and switch over to just only a verbal command. Senna, port. Good boy. Good boy, buddy. Good job. Senna, free. Good boy. All right, so moving on to steps 3 and 4, which often are really good to teach together because they flow together really well. Moving on to steps 3 and 4, that's interval reward schedule and duration reward schedule. In steps 1 and 2, we physically taught the dog what we wanted it to do. Now, in the next 2 steps, we're going to teach it that it doesn't only have to do that behavior for 1 second, it needs to do that behavior until we free it from a behavior. So what we're going to do in step 3 is we're going to start rewarding the dog in fixed or variable intervals, and that'll be a conversation for another video when you use fixed or variable. But we're going to reward the dog in fixed or variable intervals as long as it's staying in the behavior. Now, if it goes out of the behavior, there's no punishment for this. The dog, we're not using any aversives or anything other besides positive reinforcement. So as long as the dog is in the behavior we're asking for, we're going to make sure there's positive reinforcement available to it. And it's going to continuously be available at intervals as long as it stays in the behavior. Senna, come. Senna, heel. Now I got a handful of treats here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put Senna into his port heel. Senna, port. Good boy. And I'm going to start rewarding him every second here about. Nope. So this is perfect. I didn't reward him and he moved out of position. Senna, port. Port. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. And so this is teaching Senna that I want him to stay in this position, and good things are going to happen to him as long as he stays in that position. Now, depending on how good he does, I'm going to start drawing these intervals out to try and get it longer and longer amounts of time between intervals. So at first, the first time you do this drill, you probably want to give your dog intervals about once every second. And then after they get good at that, you can start giving it to them once every other second. And after they get good at that, you can give it to them 1 every 3 seconds. And keep drawing that out until you're only giving the dog 1 treat every 10 seconds or 1 treat every 15 seconds. Good boy. Now, once again, just like the marking and the fading, this usually takes a couple days to a week or 2 for a dog to go through. Good boy. But as long as Senna stays in this position, there's going to be rewards available to him. Good boy. See, now he broke the position. I'm not going to give him any more rewards. Good boy. But as soon as he goes back into the position, the rewards are going to start coming again. Good boy. All right, you can see by the time you're getting towards the end of your interval step training, you should be going 10 to 15 seconds between a reward. Let's go ahead and give Senna 15 seconds here. Good boy, buddy. Good boy. Good boy. Now don't forget, even while they're in position, like right now, we're waiting another 15 seconds. You can still be praising the dog while it's in position to encourage it to stay there um, without between rewards. You can still give it verbal praise. So when you're at the point in your interval training where you've got a dog that'll stay for about 15 seconds in position, then you're ready to move on to your duration training. We don't want to have to carry a bag of treats or a pocket full of treats with us everywhere so we can give our dog a treat every 15 seconds they're in position everywhere we go. We're trying to work down to using less treats and having the dog obey us. So the next step, the duration reward schedule, is going to be really similar to that interval, but instead of getting rewards on an interval, as long as the dog stays in position, we're going to have the dog do the behavior, and we're going to have it do it for a longer duration of time. So we'll say we're going to start at 15 seconds because that's where we were at with our intervals. We'll move to a 15-second duration, and we're going to give the dog one reward for one duration of that behavior. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate that on Senna here. Senna, come. Senna, heel. Senna, port. We're going to give it 15 seconds. Senna, free. Good boy. Good job, buddy. Good job. Now I jackpotted him a little bit there. I gave him 2 treats and I loved him up a bunch. You can do that every now and then. Don't forget to mix your rewards up for your dog. Senna, come. It's really hot out here and Senna wants to go to the shade. Out. No. Senna, heel. You're one step ahead of us, buddy. Senna, port. No. Senna, port. Port. Okay, so we're going to give him 15 seconds here. Senna, free. Good boy. Good boy. Okay. When you're working the duration step, you continue to with each drill, you make that duration of time longer that the dog has to stay in there. You might go 15 seconds, 25 seconds, 30 seconds, 45, a minute, 2.5 minutes, 5 minutes. You continue to bring it out until it's at where you need it to be. Not everybody needs their dog to be able to stay in a downstay for 10 minutes all by itself. Some people would be fine with a minute or 2 minutes. So you keep working the duration out until it's done. I like everybody to get to having their dog in an extended downstay for a couple minutes, but if that's something you don't need, that's totally fine. As long as the dog stays until you free it from the behavior, you're going to be on the right track. Moving on from the duration reward schedule, we're going to move to a ratio reward schedule. Now, a ratio reward schedule is really simple. We're going to take that same duration, everything else we've been doing beforehand, but working towards that same goal of not always having to have a pocket full of treats with us. Rather than giving the dog a reward every time it performs the behavior, we're going to start to give it a reward only certain times it performs the behavior. Now, it's not good to use a fixed interval ratio schedule, like for example giving the dog a reward every 3rd time it does the behavior or every 5th time it does the behavior, because it turns out dogs are fairly decent at counting, and they know if they're only getting it every 3rd time, they're going to do the behavior not as good the first 2 times, and they're going to be really on point that 3rd time because they know that treat's coming. So basically, you don't want them to know when a reward's coming. So you got to do it on a little bit of a random schedule typically, and we'll get into the details of the different reward schedules in a different video. But you don't want to give the dog a reward every time. So we're going to start giving it rewards on a ratio. Now, Typically, we like to express those ratios as something like a normal ratio, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, but you're not actually going to be giving it to them every third time. You're gonna be doing it trying to get an average of 1 out of every 3 times. So sometimes you might reward it twice in a row, and then you might not reward it for 4 times, and then you might reward it once, and you're just gonna mix it up to try and get for an average of about 1 out of every 3 times. Usually works pretty good. And that actually is going to make the dog work harder because they don't ever know when a reward's coming, and it's going to make you have to carry less treats because you don't need to be giving your dog a treat every time. After we've got our ratio reward schedule going on and we're no longer rewarding the dog for every time it does a behavior and we're doing it on a ratio schedule, then we're actually going to take our reward and we're going to go to the last step, which is Premack principle. Now, Premack principle is often called the grandma's rule. And it's grandma's rule because grandma would make you eat your green beans and your vegetables before you got to eat your dessert. So the textbook definition of Premack principle is that an organism is willing to perform a less desirable behavior in order to have an opportunity to perform a more desirable behavior. Basically, in this case, what that means, boiling it down for working with a dog, it means that a dog is willing to do the behaviors we're asking it in exchange for getting to do what it wants afterward. Premack principle is probably one of the most important and powerful tools you have in dog training because you are working with the most powerful motivators for your dog. To use Premack principle, you're going to take whatever your dog is most motivated by. That could be a toy, that could be a game, some kind of game of play, that could be going to smell a spot in the grass where a squirrel goes, it could be going to smell a spot in the grass where another dog goes pee. You're going to find whatever is motivating your dog the most in that moment, and you're going to use that as a reward. A good example is a lot of times going through doors. Dogs really like to go through doors. If they're going outside or whatever, they're excited to go out and play. So you can use physically going through that door as a reward for getting a behavior. So for example, if your dog's charging the door all the time, you can put the dog in a sit or a down, and you can open the door and go out yourself. And then the reward for getting to stay in that down while you peacefully went out is the dog gets to come out after you. So in that case, the dog really wants to go through the door and get outside. You make the reward getting through the door and going outside. Like I said, Premack is extremely powerful because you are using whatever is motivating the dog most as your motivator. And you just can't get around how powerful Premack is and how important it is in dog training. As you saw when I was doing the demonstrations, a couple times Senna didn't even want the treats I had in my pocket because there was a Frisbee on the ground over here. And when I freed him, he went and grabbed the Frisbee because he wanted to play Frisbee. So Premack principle is the last step in phase 1. And it is definitely one you want to focus on and get some practice with and learn to use because it is powerful. I'll give you an example of Premack reward right here. Senna, come. Bring your Frisbee, buddy. Good boy. So I'm going to have Senna do a little bit of obedience here, and then as a reward, I'm going to give him his Frisbee. Senna, heel. Port. Heel. Port. Middle. Good boy. Heel. Free. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. All right. Oh, Senna. Oh, that was kind of a lame toss. Here you go, buddy. Good boy. Good boy. That was better. All right. So that was phase 1 obedience. Using those 6 steps, we're going to teach whatever behaviors we need to teach to a dog. And that should give you, this video should have given you a good overview of what phase 1 is and how we're going to be using it. Thank you. See you guys next time. Good boy. Good boy.